after work today, I got into my truck and the power steering wasn't working for me anymore. I wasn't sure what was going on, so I got out and I looked underneath, and I had a nice puddle of fluid underneath me. You can see some more there. This is after I pulled it back inside to the shop here and started looking around to try to figure out where my leak was. And if you look at the hoses here, you can see them. The hoses themselves are pretty clean all the way around, and I couldn't see anything leaking on them. So what I ended up doing was I got a friend of mine, and I had the engine running, and I was just looking at it from here, and I had them turn the steering wheel for me. That way I put the pressure to the lines, and it wasn't leaking anywhere on the hoses, but it drained out. And so I looked all the way down below. You see all that liquid down there, and that's where it's coming from. It's right on the pitman arm of the steering gearbox there. And so basically what's happening for me is that the power steering gearbox, the seal on the output shaft has gone bad, and so when I turn the wheel all the way, it got that, you give that spike of pressure, and that's what's just blowing all the fluid out the bottom of my steering gearbox. So that's going to have to come off and get rebuilt. So my quick little project I thought of rebuilding my steering gearbox was turning into quite a hassle, and I ended up going uptown and just buying a new one because I was having issues. So basically when you're taking that off, there's three things you have to worry about. One, this is on the steering column. Now there's going to be just a clip that kind of goes around this piece right here, and there's a bolt that goes through right in there. Now that bolt, when you're taking it off, it has to come off all the way, because otherwise it sits in this groove right here, and even if it's loose, it can't come off up and up. So that bolt in there has to come out all the way, and I'll show you where that is here in a sec. Then on your pitman arm here, this ball joint, just be careful that you don't ruin the threads on here or anything getting this off. Make sure your nut is basically ready to come off before you start trying to make sure your nut's off before you start pulling your the ball joint out of the arm there. Otherwise, let's say if you're pounding on this side right here, you're going to mushroom over this, and then your nut's not going to come off because this is going to be free spinning, and you don't want that. And then on top here, these are plugged because this is a new unit here, a remanufactured unit, but that's for your power in and return lines on your unit here. Now in here, that right there, that's the unit that the nut needs to come out, or the bolt needs to come out all the way on. It's right on the steering column there, so just follow your steering column down. There's going to be a cover on it, that's this right here, and that needs to be pulled up out of the way so you can get to that nut. And in my case, it's this guy right here. It's actually a pink head on it. I believe it was a 7/16 thread. It was tight all the way, so I'm assuming that they used Loctite on it, so I'm going to put some back on. Not that big of a deal, but just make sure that you get that done and off before you take the main mounting bolts off for the unit. Otherwise it can be quite a pain. I was having problems with that ball joint, so in my situation I had those bolts off, and that's why I had problems with that steering column. Now this is where I get to the ball joint, and right in here I ended up torching off my ball joint because I screwed up and I mushroomed over that bolt on it. So that was my failure. But anyways, once that comes off and you have the steering, the power steering hoses off, there's 3 bolts over here just behind the driver's side tire. Just these 3 right here, just come in on the outside. Those come just right out, and then this cover from underneath the front bumper here, this just kind of slides down with 2 bolts that come off, and then you can slide your pump right out of this gap right in here, or the gearbox out of this gap right in here. You can see this is the back side of the frame where it mounts to, and it's just real simple, real slick once you get all that done. If you do it in the right order, it just comes right out here and it's out here sitting in your lap. Alright, so I'm getting close to finishing up my short little gearbox swap project, and I'll tell you what, absolutely nothing is going in my favor, but there it is. It is mounted to the frame right now, and I even got the pitman arm installed and tightened down, got the bolts on. Just as a quick run over of what all I had going on for me, I pulled apart my old gearbox, and that one I was going to try to rebuild it, couldn't get the pitman arm off for starters, and also I looked at the worm gear on the inside and that was absolutely ruined, and so I had so much play in there and that's where it was coming from. So I ended up getting a new gearbox and a new pitman arm, so I'll put the new pitman arm on, and I put that on exactly where it was marked on the gearbox. Well, I didn't think to look at it before because I put that on at a 90-degree angle, and so when I tried to take that pitman arm back off of the gearbox, that I ended up breaking the puller that I was using, so that went great. I tried the torch and hammer method, that didn't work, and I ended up using a hydraulic press. Hopefully I didn't screw anything up on the gearbox itself, but the gearbox went back on and the pitman arm went right back on it. Used some extra force to put it back on, I think, but it's on there, so I finally got that straightened out. Then I go to put the bolts on, and they weren't threading into through the frame into the gearbox itself, so I pulled that back off and checked out the bolts into the gearbox, and they are not the same threads. Same hole size, not the same threads. So I went around looking for a tap. Maybe I could tap the holes out, or a die to rethread the bolts that I had there, and I couldn't find anything that matched. So what I did was I was able to get them in about 2 or 3 threads, so put the socket on and started driving them in. Well, got them in most of the way. I'm using just an electric impact, and got them in, and I kid you not, I stripped all 3 of them off, the heads off, so they are in and they're going to stay in. The only way they're coming out is with the torch. So then I'm putting on my pitman arm, and I realized that the pitman arm onto the steering rod there, you can see that shiny silver piece right down in the bottom pointing at it there. I didn't put my grease cert on my pitman arm, so I got a bunch of grease and grime into that ball joint there, but I put the grease cert on now, so hopefully that's not too bad. So hopefully all I got left is putting the steering shaft on and the hoses, so I can only screw up about 1 or 2 more things, so hopefully I don't. Alright, so got my hoses back on, got my steering column back on, and tell you what, on that steering column, getting that into place I had a heck of a time. I'm not sure why, but I had to, probably took me 5 or 6 minutes of just sitting there shaking it back and forth while pulling it onto the steering box as hard as I could. Finally it started moving, and I think I even used a hammer, not the hammer end of a hammer, but the butt end, and just tapped it down into place, and that seemed to work better. The hoses I got on, and those you can't actually screw up because there's 2 different sized fittings, so that's kind of nice. But once you get all that done, what you want to do is you're going to fill up your power steering fluid, get that up. I put it way past the level actually, because I figured I had to fill up the lines and everything, and wasn't sure if the gearbox was primed at all, so I just filled it up past. And then what you do is you get in, start up your vehicle and start turning your wheels back and forth until you don't have any whining at all from the pump. So you go all the way left, all the way right, all the way left, all the way right, and make sure you get all the way to the side, because that's the highest pressure situation. That way it'll push all the air bubbles out of the lines and everything. So Once you do that, if you still have whining, then that's when you need to stop, refill your pump reservoir, and keep going from there. But once you get that all filled, once you get all the air bubbles out and everything, and that's all filled up, it's good to go.